Hi, I'm Phil Callan and I'm co-host of this video course, and welcome to Sharon.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah.
Good to be doing it with you.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
And the course today is about classroom libraries. Do you want to?
Yes, So really talking about, some of you will have classroom libraries already up and going in your classroom. Some of you will be wanting to start a classroom library, but we're really talking about how the things that you want to think about in establishing it, its purposes for its use, and how you can use it most effectively. So we'll do a little bit of talking. Well, actually, you'll see us for a little bit, but then we want to take you on a grand tour of some of the classroom libraries that have been set up by teachers that I've been working with over the last few years. These all happen to be in Australian classrooms. So if you are listening to this and you're outside of Australia, it'll be lovely for you to see inside some classrooms. And we'll get to those of you in Australia, get to see how some other teachers have set up their classroom libraries as well. There are a lot of classroom libraries in schools that I work with that aren't represented in this collection. So I could probably update this a little bit too, to really expand and take notice and share more of the things that I'm seeing in classroom libraries. But for this session today, or for this course, we're going to have a look at classroom libraries from our first year of school through to year 7. So just having a look at not only the libraries, but some of the other tools that teachers are using to support their libraries, and some of the other tools we wrap around the use of the classroom library as well, so that students are engaging fully in the classroom library, because it just isn't a nice space in your room. It should be absolutely purposeful, and students being fully engaged in it, knowing why it's there and how to use it, and being part of bringing that together. So Phil, we've both had classroom libraries in our classrooms.
Just before we're going, that was a very good intro, Sharon. Yes, no, we have both had classroom libraries in our classrooms, and what a joy it is to set them up and to see kids actually using them, really having a lot of fun with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we probably both need to say too that they aren't it's always a work in progress. There isn't, it isn't always just I've got everything that I need to get a library set up, that over time it builds. And so we don't need to feel like we need to have a lot to start a classroom library at the beginning of a year or whenever we start it, but that it is a growing resource and tool that we keep growing and developing over time. In fact, there can be an overload on a classroom library where we feel like if we've got so much now that we can't get it all out there. It's okay to have some things stored away and to bring things out and refresh libraries as we need as well.
Yeah, and also I guess the really big thing about a classroom library is every book in there is an excellent model of the English language that children can aspire to. But we're going to get onto more of that, and you know, there's two aspects to it. There's the teacher teaching with that classroom library and those books, and also there is the aspect of the kids using those books themselves in their own independent reading.
Yes, yeah, and so they're the two big key points of that, of course, is that it's both a tool for the teacher and in teaching and bringing a collection of texts together. And your point is good, Phil, that they're exemplary examples of text that we're bringing to our students. You know, this richness, more rich than we could ever bring from things that we wrote, so that there is this wonderful richness in the collection that we can teach with and through, so for read aloud and for shared reading, but also for students then to have, and here's a big word, have access to a rich range of literature that's at their fingertips. So the things that we're going to cover some of these aspects. I've got classroom libraries heading the bill here, but we're also going to look at how these other tools relate to that. So readers' notebooks and students having their own notebook as a record of their reading. The literacy block structure or the English block structure of where do we use, we've already talked about that we would be using it for read alouds and for shared reading and independent reading. But a classroom library doesn't exist just for the English block. We're bringing collections of texts to our students so that they've got them there all through the day. So we want texts within the library that represent other areas of the curriculum as well. Something that we also connect with readers' notebooks, or we might have that as a separate record for our students, and that's conferring sheets. So a record, so it might be a conferring notebook, or it might be part of the reader's notebook, but when we're conferring with students, how we're gathering that information. Reading logs, how students keep a log of their reading, how we can use reading, writing surveys to find out about our students' interests, and therefore what kinds of books that they will be interested in engaging with, as well as books that and types of texts that they've never been exposed to before. I've got literature logs on there, and actually I have to admit that I don't think I've got a slide in there of the literature log. We'll
just
come back to that one. That might just have to be an oral piece around that. And mini books being students making books. So the making of texts, so that we've got both their own books as part of classroom libraries, books they've made. And the other one that we've got some photos of but didn't put on the list is class-made books. So some big books that we make together as a class, and how they can form a great part of our library collection. So the importance of classroom libraries, we've already talked about the notion that this is giving students access to a wide and full range of text experiences right at their fingertips, housed in the classroom. So in building that classroom community, that community of readers, we've got this wonderful, rich collection. But I do want to just go to this nice little piece of research that we've got from the International Literacy Association that tells us that those students who are in classrooms without literature collections do 50% less reading than do students in classrooms with such collections. So if we have our students reading 50% less because they don't have access to books and have them readily available in their classroom and are talking about those books with their peers, and know that when a peer that has shared a book talks about it and they go, oh, I think I would so love to read that one. That if we know that we're providing that opportunity for students to be doing more reading, and that we fully understand that good readers read a lot, and that all of our students need that opportunity to be able to do a lot of reading every day. So that really kind of places that on the court for us, saying, well, if we provide a classroom library, we are already enabling our readers, our students, to live a stronger reading life because they've got access to books. And one other really important part about the classroom library being this wide-ranging tool for our students. So a classroom library isn't just a collection of texts that are leveled or sorted just so students can select by the difficulty of text. We need a library to be organised in a way that helps children to know how to access the books that they can be choosing to read, and can read with, you know, have good entry points into those books and be able to read them with some independence. But we also want the classroom library to help our students develop as readers in these ways. So their progress as readers isn't just dependent on them being given a book, and once they've achieved that book, or that level, that they're ready for the next. We actually want them to really be developing in these ways as self-motivated, self-directed, and self-regulated learners. So there's three key things there for us, aren't they? That we want students to be self-motivated by being in charge of choosing books, of saying, I know what it is that I'm interested in, and that's what I'm going to look for. So that's part of developing their strategies, or living a life as a reader, to be self-motivated, to want to read, and to have that opportunity through the classroom library to find books that are going to be of interest to me. Self-directed, so that children are in charge of you know, that choice and that selection. And self-regulated, so that if we're talking about that in terms of a classroom library, that they can know that, here is some text that, or a type of text that I've never read before, and I know I haven't read that, and I want to give that a go, and I'll see how that's working. Can I manage that? Can I? So really reflecting on themselves and seeing how things are working for them as readers. Now, I'm just talking a lot about selection here at the moment, but outside of that, for all of the strategies that our students need as readers, comprehension strategies and reading process strategies, preferences, opinions, all of these things fall under, we function better when we are self-motivated, self-directed, and self-regulated learners, and that's what we as teachers are trying to enable our students to become. And just a couple of things to share with you before we go into some classrooms and looking at those things. If you're thinking about setting up a classroom library, or in fact, if you've got one and you want to just give or have a bit of a checklist for yourself about, right, what are the things that, yes, I've thought about and I've got in place, and what are those things that, maybe I hadn't thought about that before, and that might be something that I could incorporate into the library to increase the success of its use or its organisation or whatever. So just up here on TeachIVIT, we've actually got an article called Establishment and Use of Classroom Libraries. And it's a little bit of a checklist around some of the things that we can think about. So it's divided into a number of categories. The first one being the design and position of a classroom library. So, and I won't go through all of the things in there, but that will talk about things, you know, and this is what you'll get to see, and we'll talk about these things as we look through the slides and we go wandering through some classroom libraries. So the design and position of a classroom library can make a difference. The nature of the collection, what's in the collection and what does it represent? Are there, you know, engaging texts that represent a wide range of genres and types of texts? So books, magazines, definitely chapter books. In the Australian curriculum at each year level, when we look at the achievement standards, it actually talks to us about what kinds of texts we are wanting our students to engage with independently through their life of school, so that we are thinking about, have we got chapter books available for our or our early chapter books available for our year twos? Are they part of the collection? Are we bringing those kinds of things into our young readers' lives so that they can take those, practice within a variety of types of texts? There is also another section about the size and collection, the size of the collection and the organisation of it. We already said a little bit about it doesn't need to be, if you feel like you're starting small, it's okay. Like, I actually remember the one and only book I started my classroom library collection with, and it was the year Roald Dahl's book Matilda came out. And that was actually the first book in our classroom library. But from there, we actually used the school library, and I know you did too, although I also know we purchased a lot of books ourselves.
Although I must say, we're in an era now where the purchasing is not as expensive when you go to a garage sale or you get parents to drop books in. There's so many ways to, book sales. There's a really rich way of collecting books now, which we didn't have. We really went out to purchase our own. Yeah. But the classroom library has, the school library has, and I'm sure the school librarian would be really keen on
doing bulk borrows. Yeah, so that we can really, and it's wonderful. Classroom libraries are better when they are built with our students as well. So it's not just our job, but to have them involved in the collecting and choosing of books. I know sometimes I take my students to the library, and I've done this many times actually with classes that I've been working with, where we go to the library and everybody might choose, they might choose a couple of the favourite books that they have that they would like to share with the class, that they would like to promote to the class. They might be thinking about authors that they really are interested in, and that we bring those in. So it's wonderful to be able to involve students in doing that too.
And then there's that real ownership, and the children really make that library a part of what they want.
Yes, yes. Well, there's investment in it already, and especially if that means that you've got students in the class who are able to talk about books that are already in the library, because they're about to sell those books to somebody else. Because we all know the person that we, the person in our class who's reading things that we're likely to like. And so, if they recommend that book recommendations are a huge way for us to find books to read.
And really the teacher's recommendation is so powerful in the early years. And it is to some extent.
All the way through, I would say.
Yeah. But then peer recommendations become even bigger as the children get older in years, 4, 5, 6.
Yes,
and so on.
And so just that idea of having students being able to recommend books within a classroom is a great way to expand children's knowledge about, what's in our collection, what I can go and look for that I might not have thought about before. And I know that it's there. I know that it's ready for me. It's not even necessarily having to go on a wish list. It means that I can find it straight away. I am just going to go back to that point. I think you did qualify it by saying, that at the time that we were setting up classroom libraries a long time ago, that we didn't have like garage sales and book donations from families, weren't as, weren't a common thing then. And I know a lot of teachers that I work with are really intentional when they do go to a garage sale or a book exchange. They're actually going looking for books that they know their students are going to be interested in, and really looking for, I'm going to say, high quality literature and books on topics because they know about their students. So they already know what their students are interested in and what they want to bring. And in fact, what they know their students aren't yet interested in and what they can bring to expand their students' knowledge and range of reading that they're doing. Size of collection. Well, we did kind of talk about that. And of course, in our younger years, the collection is bigger because we've got our students moving through books at a much greater rate because our older readers are going to be in chapter books and longer books, so they're going to be sustained through those longer texts. Now, the use of the classroom library, of course, during that English block or that time of teaching, we've already talked a little bit about that, but the reading aloud, using books within that collection to read aloud to our students are actually accessing again a whole lot, just more books that they know that are in the collection, so that if it's been read aloud to them, that they've got that to also, and sometimes actually the read aloud, it's good to have more than one copy of it, because some children absolutely love to be able to read, read a little bit behind you or read a little bit ahead, or because it's familiar, your read aloud has meant that they've got an entry point in that to try a lot of that for themselves. But it's absolutely anything that we're reading aloud to them should either come from the classroom collection or be introduced into the classroom collection once we've read it, so that there is access to that book. And of course, that's the wonderful thing. If we are a teacher who loves to work with, if we believe and value how much literature teaches our students as readers, they're hearing rich language through text read aloud, they're hearing how fluent reading sounds, what it's like to adjust and monitor reading as a teacher is reading aloud. We're modelling that. All of the modelling that's happening through read aloud. If we've got a classroom library, we have got a rich collection there that we can draw on ourselves, access to that at any time, and that we can point, if we've read something or we're reading something aloud and it's in a particular genre, then we can point out that we've got other books in the library that are also, might be a fantasy book, and so there's other books in the library in that genre that we can point children in the direction of. So our read aloud and our knowledge of the classroom library is important. We need to, for it to work well, we need to know it well. We don't need to have read every book in it, but we need to be able to know enough about that library and to have organised it in a way that we can bring that information to our students around that as well. So read aloud, shared reading. So big books, if you're in the first few years of school and you've got big books in your library, in your school library, and they're not really being borrowed or used very much, go and get those books and get them into your classroom. Because for shared reading, we're just teaching so much about what it is to be a reader when all students in the class can see the text, and that those books themselves can be accessed then for independent reading. Once upon a time, big books always came with multiple little books, little versions of it, which was just fabulous for students to then access, a whole group, usually 6 or so little books would come with it. They don't do that. Publishers aren't doing that these days so much. But if you do find little books to go with the big books, it's fabulous.
And might I say, you can make your own big books.
Yes.
And
yes, and we'll see some, yes. some examples of that, making big books
In fact, that's how
and
it all
have
started.
students
because
illustrating them.
a long time ago, when there weren't big books, that's how it all started with.
Well, Don Holdaway's
yeah.
work with students in classrooms in New Zealand. So that's where the term shared reading, and that's what it means, looking, sometimes shared reading, some people will use that term as we're all reading the same book together, or I'm reading with a buddy, when in fact the idea of shared reading is that the text is large enough for all students. So it was replicating the idea of a child sitting on a parent's lap and being able to see the text and the pictures as it's being read by the parent, and the big book is replicating that. So read aloud, shared reading, and then of course independent reading is where we want students to have the optimum. That's how we can absolutely optimize that classroom library, so that if students are able to readily access books that are in that collection, and they want to be able to have a book box or book wallet or a book bag that keeps their books there, so that they've got those ready for every day, and that they can keep working with those books, so that I'm not putting it back and someone else has got that book the next day. But it allows children to form their collection of, and that collection it should be mostly books that they've either had, they've been able to select, but with teacher guidance, so that we are helping them to be more and more successful at choosing books. Sometimes we will need to help children be matched to books because they won't know what book. What do I read next? What's the next thing that I can find? And we need to be really instrumental in helping them to find those books. And that's why if we know that classroom library collection, we know a lot about that collection, and we've been building that collection with our students in mind, it really helps us to be able to go, oh, do you know, we've got more books like that. You've finished a fantasy, we've got more like that. Let's see if we can find something in there. Or we might at that point be able to say, can anyone in the class recommend a book that would be the right one for this person, because they've read something, they go, yes, this book was like that. I think that would be a good book for, for so-and-so to read. Sometimes in that collection, there will be books that seem to be easy for children, because sometimes it's those easy books that allow them to do more and more and more as a reader as they practice with it, so that it becomes easy, but it becomes more fluent. They understand more of what they're doing. They're paying attention. They're fixing up, monitoring, correcting, adjusting. We want them to be practicing doing those things so that we can see how they're achieving and growing as a reader. And sometimes there might be some challenging material in there that interests them, and they may be able to access some of it and have entry points into some of it, but maybe they can't read all of that with independence yet, and it might be that it's not too far off what they can do independently. We want them to, we want them to be working towards more challenging text as they go along. All right, we've talked we can use the classroom library for take-home reading as well. If it's in school and we're reading it at school, we might like to take that home. All right, sorry, that was a very long introduction. Let's get into some classrooms. So off we go. First one that we're going into is a reception 1, year 1 class. So reception in South Australia, that's our first year, so our 5-year-olds. So in this classroom library, you'll see a number of things happening here. So in the top left-hand corner, we have a whole lot of dreaming stories. So we've got a display of those. So all the covers are out and we can see the collection of all of those books there. On the right, here you're seeing a little piece with Velcro characters and different elements of the story. To the left, we can see Mrs. Wishy-Washy and the cow and the bathtub. So we've got some props for retelling stories. So students can engage with stories together in little groups, so there's a great little centre activity or a retelling activity that is part of and is set up in the classroom library. Bottom left, you'll see a book stand with, you know, all kinds of picture books. You know, they're not organised by title or level or anything. There's just a whole collection of picture books. And to the right of that, and as we see close up on the bottom right slide, is where we now have a whole collection of books that have been sorted by their difficulty. And so the demands that they bring to the reader. Top left-hand corner of the books, you'll notice a colour square. So for this school, they use a colour for not just an individual level of books rated against or levelled by the reading recovery levels, but they use it to represent a range of books. So green might represent levels 1, 2, and 3. Blue might represent 4, 5, 6. So there's the idea that students aren't just looking for the number on the book of what level it is, but it's about them opening the book and looking to see whether this book has got features in it that are right for me as a reader. So looking at how many lines of print there are, or whether there's a pattern, or whether there's whether it's, you know, an information book or a story, whether it's whatever the features are. You're really just seeing this from a different angle. The left slide, you'll see those dreaming stories at the top, but beneath now you can see some baskets of books. Once again, they're sorted, but these aren't sorted by level, they're sorted by author. Close up at the bottom right, not just by author, but by character. So the Elmer books, Harry McClary, Aussie Nibbles, so the category of books, Lulu Bell, Ava Ann. So they're sorted so students can find them by the book character or the author. You'll also see on the left side that there is a basket. Oh, actually, we were looking at those books. I said they were picture books before. I can see now they're all big books. So that's what's in the stand. There are a whole lot of big books. Top right-hand photo, once again, you're just seeing some of those books being sorted by their level, but organised in batches by colour. Another first year of school classroom, and this was set up, this was pretty new at the time. You might remember, Phil, wasn't it? It was this school really sort of set up spaces in all of their classrooms with these bookshelves and baskets of books. So here we've got on the left slide, we've got on top of the shelf, there's a whole lot of big books just resting on top of there. And then we've got baskets of books sorted by types of books. So there's alphabet books, animal books. There'll be some by author again. So different categories and different ways of students to be able to select books by a category.
I must say, in this school, when we brought these classroom libraries into the school, it changed the whole culture of what children did in their relaxation times, or even before school or after school.
Yes.
Picking a book out of their classroom library would become a thing to do, not just go over and, you know, build something with the blocks, but reading and looking at books became a really important thing for them to do.
Well, it became another option.
In their own time. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, because there's nothing wrong with the building of the blocks, with blocks, but it absolutely, we found, because they had access to them, that they were interacting and engaging with the classroom libraries constantly. You know, it was it was that opportunity, we've already used that term, of just really living a reader's life. Yeah, being able to, that's a great point to make. All right, next slide is in another first year of school class, but I want to show how, so they've used some of their learning of their high frequency words and putting those into some sentence stems to do some book publishing. And so what you see here on the right hand side slide, on the left hand, we can write and read these words, and you can see there are some books that are pinned up beneath those sentence starters. And on the right, you see here a book, so I love to jump in mud puddles, and it's stapled. So this is a I love to, which you can see is one of the sentence stems. So this is now a child creating a book of their own using those high frequency words that they are learning. And I really want to point out here how they're using the high frequency words correctly. And we're absolutely opening the doors for them for the rest of that writing to be, I write as best I can, I give it a go. And so we can see here that there is a dual purpose in this bookmaking, that we're using both our knowledge of words that we've learnt, and then using all our sound letter knowledge to try all those other words. This is an example now of a class making a book. So every child has created an A3 page. And so then these were, once every child had done their page, were stapled to make a class book. And you'll notice that the teacher has written beneath some of the words. So in the second slide, look out, said the bunny rabbit, and that the teacher has written the word beneath. In the bottom left, look out for the disco shark, because the teacher will have talked to the child about they've got their writing there, and they will have read that to the teacher, and the teacher is then writing so that everybody, including the child, can also read that writing, so that we all know what it is, what the message is that that child was wanting to communicate. That's the class book then, and we want to be able to have everybody reading it and be able to use that. We might want to use that for shared reading. Then we'll want to have those words there. So that's an example of a class book being made. And this final slide from this class is showing how each child, they have a space for their publications. So there's a photo, their name, and you'll see the books that they've made. This is like the publisher's library, the class publishing library. So this is fair and square in the classroom library, that we can also go to the books that have been made by those in our class. All right, we're moving to another first year of school class, and it's an example of a big book that's been made. So this was made just on the day. They made their dream book, just using the idea of having a dream jar from the BFG. And after reading that part of the book, you can see they've been given some parts. So they've been given a jar template where they've got what they are dreaming about in there, and then they've got some paper choice below them. So these pieces have been stuck in separately, where they've written in what I'm making a gingerbread with my mum and my dad. So these books become a big part of classroom libraries, as well as the published, the trade books that we bring in. So this is a child making a book. So we can see drawing, text here. I can paint a pink lion. I can paint a donkey. And so these are examples of different children with the books that they've made. So this is in a year 2-3 class, where on the left you see some of their collections of books that they've got in there and how they're sorted. And then on the right, we've got books that they've made that are up there on display as well. Moving into another year 2-3 class. So you can see how this one's organised by its layout. This is actually a combined library between 2 year 2-3 classes. So it's a shared collection between the two. Everything that you can see there is part of this collection. So it's quite a big space. But once again, you can see the baskets allowing for students to be able to flick through those and get to see the covers of books, which makes it much easier to choose when I can see the covers and not just the spine of the book. So that's very intentional, having those baskets, and we saw that in the reception 1 classes as well. Once again, we've got some books on the right here at the top of the displays, that are singular books on display. So we're just seeing them by cover, but notice all the labels, all the labeling that's happening there to give children quick entry points to find books. And so to be able to know, oh, yes, I can go there. How are they sorted? Year 5 teacher I worked with last year just did that one thing, put books into categories and had some of the students help and labeled them, completely changed how students accessed that library. So it's quite intentional to have books sorted so that we can give children ways into collections. Same classroom, but I always want to bring in showing how students' publications make their way into the classroom library. So here we've got in this year 2-3 class, books that they've made and that they're there in that classroom library for borrowing. And I feel, Phil, you always had this wonderful little technique of just in the back of the book, where children could write comments to the author.
Yeah, that was a great thing.
Yes, yeah. So
and we always said they had to be constructive comments. Just an A4 page with lots of lines, and they put the date and their name in their comment.
Yes, just wonderful to get that, to know somebody has read my book and is giving me some feedback on it. So anyway, we're seeing all kinds of fiction and non-fiction books there.
Because it's in that reading of the books or sharing, when an audience sees your writing, that there becomes more of a purpose, and also a purpose for conventions.
Yes, yes, because we want our books to be able to be read by others.
And spelling.
That's right. And I know we're talking classroom libraries, but from year 3 on in the Australian curriculum, plan, draft and publish books. But this is also demonstrating we're publishing right from reception, from the first year of school. We're publishing books because students really get a much stronger idea then of why we write, and that we are writing so others can read what we've written, that we can communicate that. All right, here's another year 2-3 classroom, seeing some of the other tools that wrap around the classroom library. So top left, we can see their book boxes. Each child's labelled their box, and in there is their collection of books that they are working with at this time. In this class, those boxes are well worn, because children, first thing they do when they come in the morning is collect it from the shelf and put it on their table. It's there all day with them. They love to have their books there with them, because a little bit like you said, we noticed with that school, when libraries came in, just how much students wanted to have their books with them during the day to access at all times. In there also, in this middle photo, my reading book, that was the place where they also kept And bottom right, you'll see they had a reading log. So they were writing in what they were reading. So title, date, author. There's some other things there about whether it was fiction or non-fiction, whether it was just right or easy or too hard, how many pages they read. So at that time of the year, teacher decision about what information they wanted students to be recording and catching. And such a useful tool when that's open on a table for teachers to rove during that independent reading time, to actually see how students are going with their reading, what they're finishing, what they're not. Are they having trouble finding books? Are they never finishing a book? Is it for them to judge? Is it just right for me? Is it too hard? And are we seeing them then? Do they need some help finding something more appropriate? So Reader's Notebook rubric, so how they're responding to reading, you'll see on the left there. So book responses, Australian curriculum, it's about having opinions and preferences for books. We want to have some of that oral discussion around those things, and sometimes we want to catch some of that information. So that middle one is a little bit about, you know, our opinions of each of the characters in this story. They had character on one side and on the other side their opinion of that character. Now, this is a year 2, 3, 4 class who at the end of term 1 of this year at school got all of the things out of their classroom library and did a resort.
That's a good idea.
Such a great, and it was so exciting for them. You know, it was like, oh my goodness, we'd forgotten this was even in our classroom library. But what it gave them an opportunity to do was say, all right, we've got some school library books here. Which ones do we want to return? Which ones do we want to keep? What do we want to find more of? What are we missing from our collection? So bottom right, you can see all these labels that were made of books that they found. And then that gave them the opportunity to go, oh, we want to find some more of this. Or we've got some books, you know, in this category, but it's not much, you know, let's expand that. Or, you know what we're missing? So it was such a rich and valuable exercise to do. And in fact, at the end of each term, it is a good time to think about what do we need for next term in our classroom library? What is it that we've, you know, what is it that we're moving into that we need books around that? What units of study are we doing? What's happening in the content areas that we might need information on? This one's the year 4, 5, 6 class. You'll see down the bottom here, the teacher has created, this is an A3 size class reading journal, and you can see the gathering and the wanderings that she's modelling in here to support them when they were doing entries for themselves in their own reading journals. Above, you will see a collection of dreaming stories here on the left. And this was at the beginning of the term where they were about to do a unit on fantasy books. So their read aloud was going to be the Spiderwick Chronicles. And so the teacher had already set up a fantasy books collection so that they would be able to have other fantasy books to explore along with their read aloud. Next one is a year 4, 5 class. Once again, you see the intentional book covers facing out, labels, big sign, our reading corner. And just to point out that on those charts there actually were each child's reading goal. So did they have a goal to do with comprehension or fluency, and their name was up there, just to make public that that was the goal that they were working on, and also really help the teacher in looking at who I might need to bring together for a flexible grouping, you know, to do a little bit of work on fluency or whatever. It was a great way to, and for students to be, you know, quite clear about what it was that they were working on. Next one is a year 6, 7 class that looks very different from all the ones that we've shown, because the spines are what we see here. And there's two really important things to say about that as an arrangement. One is that these children have come from a number of years of being in classes with classroom libraries. So they're very familiar with the idea of a classroom library, how it works, what its purpose is. And with the small space that they had in their classroom at that time, they decided that it was okay to organise it. And they helped in the organisation of this. And you can see in the right-hand side here, these slips, laminated strips that are that have been put into to mark the category. So they have got this huge collection. Third thing to know about this collection is that you can see books are stacked on top of, and like this is with a lot of books being out in children's boxes at the moment. This isn't just what's, this isn't the whole collection. This is just what's not being read at the moment. And the teacher in this class brings in new books to the collection on a regular basis. She's always thinking about what are children looking for, what are they needing, and it's not unusual for Monday mornings to begin with, I've got a new collection of books that I've brought in. Here I'm doing a little book show, book taste, and they're going into the collection. And it's frequently the students then putting them into the collection saying, oh, well, this would go there and this would go there. So there's this wonderful ownership and community built around that. This is a year 6-7 reader's notebook, and some of the things that they have put into notebooks, so that we've got something quite decorative here on the left, books I have loved. So that's one student's representation of that with coloured copies of those book covers. Here, the second one along, books I've loved. And so really acknowledging the life that the reader has had so far, and that we're going to continue with that life. So really giving children an opportunity to be valued for what it is that has already formed them as a reader. Just write books. I think that was actually a chart that was made rather than a book in their entry, and I think that went into the classroom library. And then an entry of fake reading, real reading. What does it look like if it's fake reading? What does it look like if it's real reading? This is another way that year 6-7 teacher has used the reader's notebook, where they had done a lot of work with the Lady of Shalott. And because that's written in verse, what students did, they experimented and adapted, which is on the Australian curriculum in that literature strand. They actually did a narrative version of that verse. The language use is rich and just literature glorious. It's such good examples of how literature can then elevate our own writing by the way that we can write with it. So we can see here the retelling and illustrating. A few more examples here from some books that they'd responded to in singular pages in this instance. Just another example of a reading log. So this one's a reading calendar. So this is a year 5-6 example where a child has actually written in for Sunday and Saturday. They're writing in every day. So they take this home with them. They're writing in how long in the box, how long they're reading. They've written in when it was finished, when they started the new one. So we finished Amulet Firelight and then started Amulet the Elf King, read 30 pages, read for 20 minutes. On the left here, we see that their goal 1 was to read every day for 20 minutes. And we can see them doing that through the weekends as well. And their second goal was read more adventure books. And then we also see down the bottom that they had some further goals, that they wanted to read 3 books and read 30 pages a day. So this is about them setting goals for themselves and taking ownership of, you know, what it is they're doing to build reading stamina and range of reading. Just another one, just another example of a calendar and goal setting. And another one to show you they don't all look the same. You know, that we've got students coming at different points here, but what's so important to say here, for this child, we can see that this is a child who had not at this point finished a book, and this was in the second half of year. This child was in year 5, hadn't finished a chapter book independently yet, and we can see every day reading some pages and keeping a record of that, and just so proud when took home and finished the Roar, like took it home and finished it. Next day started a new one. So wonderful things that get caught there. This is, you know, the other extreme again then too, you know, each of the weeks we're adding up how many pages we've read, you know, of different things. We've got post-it notes in here of, because this was important to that child. And so what's important about these is children actually absolutely love this idea of seeing at the end of a month their achievement as a reader. So just a whole lot of examples of ways of not only building and establishing a classroom library, but wrapping some of those tools around it as well. If you are interested in looking at some more, in fact, we could link that checklist to this course.
And the podcast.
And the podcast. So we've, a lot of these things we've discussed on a podcast. And so there's some more information, how important it is that the classroom library is a significant tool in our readers' lives, and that it does make such a difference to them accessing, to them widening their experiences with books, to be sharing it as a community. And
for you as a teacher to be using those books for shared reading or read aloud. So it becomes part of your teaching repertoire to use these wonderful books in your classroom library.
Yes, yes, because they are there. They're there all the time. And so it is so nice, isn't it, to be able to just draw on the things that, you know, that we have with us in the classroom, and that our students can access again after that because they've had it, they've experienced it. And I suppose one thing that we haven't really talked about here is the importance of the physical book, that we can sometimes bring books to our students. Maybe we've brought it to them as a digital version, and then they don't have access to it. If it's not, well, maybe they've got access to it on their device, but the sitting around a book or sitting with somebody with a book, sharing a book, being able to access it, myself to be up close and personal with a book, especially if it's a picture book, to hold it. I'll never forget that prep class in Victoria that I went into. They'd seen the book on, we'd used it as a digital text on one day, and I went in the next day with the actual hard copy of it, and everyone said, she's got the book, she's got the book. So to build a reader's life and to live a reader's life, we really do need, books
and the other,
in hands.
I think the other really important point is it becomes part of your community. All these books, we've all share them together and we talk about them together, and they're kind of a, you know, I suppose it's like having a garden where the children all work in that garden together. Well, it's the same with this group of books that you're becoming familiar with and talking to each other about, and there's so much power in that.
Yes, community. A classroom library is really about building a community of readers. because we've all got equal access.
We talk about the same books.
We can talk about the same books, and we can, you know, we all can participate. I think there's a big piece about that. I'm an equal participant in there, because I am part of this community, and that this collection, I see myself in that collection.
Anyway,
we must.
We thank you for joining us today in our video course on classroom libraries, and we hope you've enjoyed it. And thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, everyone, for being with us, and bye for now.
Bye.